36 apparitions, to me, is a project which starts where science ends. It is an attempt to explore and visualize that large area of the human existence where, or which cannot really be empirically proven, which cannot be put into numbers, which is difficult to describe in words and maybe more suitably depicted in images. This particular palimpsest here, apparition 37, when you look at the first and the last image, we see two air mattresses, cross-shaped. They are held by a pair of hands, and the rest of the body remains unseen. So there is an element of presence and absence in that. It is also almost like the body blends in with the air mattresses in some images. And if anything, the hands support the air mattresses rather than forcing them into a different shape or form. The question, what actually causes that change in shape and form, remains unanswered. This triptych, apparition 23, we see the contours of a human figure in the background trying to grab a black heart-shaped balloon, and the idea of presence and absence is visualized here through a screen which is almost like an invisible wall separating the human figure from the black balloon. And it's only on the last image, the one on the right-hand side, where the hands physically come through the screen and grab the balloon and distort it in an act of transformation. Apparition 41 takes the idea of different levels or planes further. We can't really tell whether there is any human presence, being direct or indirect, in the image. We see the contours of a female figure, the shadow of a female figure behind the screen, and the mirrored image in the water. But it is not obvious whether what we see is a real person and their shadow, or a projection, or an image, or something else. My next project, Face to Face, is a series of experimental portraiture in the form of single cinemascope-like images. One of the drawbacks or limitations of still portraiture is that we see the person only in one particular angle or view, a full face or a profile view. And over the past centuries, various attempts have been made to overcome this limitation. For instance, in the form of the triple portrait. You may be familiar with the portrait of Charles I by Anthony van Dyck, or the triple portrait of the Cardinal de Richelieu by Philippe de Champagne. They are images where you see the sitter in a profile view, and then in a full face view, and then more or less the opposite profile, all in one painting, all in one image. And these images can certainly provide much more and much more complex information than any single view could do, but at the same time they make another limitation quite obvious, and that is that the person portrait is basically in a form of standstill. Now this image here, Supersonic Realities, is a good example, typical example of my approach. You can see a view of the person in profile, followed by a controlled movement of the head followed by a view in the opposite profile. This is a process the human eye can witness and the video camera can record, but it is only the photographic camera which can condense this complex process and convert it into a single image, which is something different. And that different picture is more like an impression of a face. It's something where detail gets substituted by essence, and it is an experience or comparable to an experience when you're sitting in a car driving down the street at some speed and you see some people on the sidewalk or at a bus stop, and you glance at their faces, you see them just for a fraction of a second, and that produces a very particular image which you won't get at a longer exposure time. The next two images, You're With Me and The Kiss of Apollo, here I've taken this approach a bit further and tried to reduce or ask the question how little movement is required. The way I approached this is by limiting the distance the head travels to an absolute minimum. So what you basically have is two standstill faces with a very small interface, and one could say in a way it is also a form of linking the present with the very immediate past through the human presence in a single image. When I started working on Snow and Concrete, I was looking for a new contemporary form of vanitas imagery, something non-static, dynamic, with the idea of change and transformation, and with a beginning and an end. What I actually do is I take the snow into the underground car park and arrange it there in geometric and organic shapes and forms. And then the set is lit with theater lighting. As you can see in this polyptych Snow and Concrete form, there are very bright lights which can cast dramatic shadows. So it's not your typical car park atmosphere, to say the least. One could say it's deliberately surreal to create an element of doubt. Snow and Concrete 1 is a large polyptych consisting of 9 images. In some of the larger polyptychs, sometimes I put more emphasis on the idea of the life cycle, and I do that by changing the sequence of the images so that the snow seems first to melt and then rebuild itself. As the snow melts and turns into water, solid turns into liquid, what is white turns into something dark, cold turns into warmth, and before too long everything is completely gone. Some of the works from Snow and Concrete are not only conventionally wall-hung images, but are also presented in the form of site-specific installations. And we will see this polyptych and the previous one in the form of a site-specific installation in a moment. But prior to that, I would like to bring your attention to an installation I did at the University of Glasgow in 2008. This work is Snow and Concrete 10. They are large, transparent textile banners mounted on mobile scaffolding. The space and the audience in the space would merge with the images in a way, as they are transparent and you can see the space and people moving behind them. So they're like a veil and a mirror at the same time. Also, the scaffolding itself obviously provides a direct frame for the images, but on the other hand, especially the mobile scaffolding is also the quintessentially non-permanent structure and therefore symbolizes an act of transformation. Finally, as part of a solo show, presented Snow and Concrete 1 and Snow and Concrete 11 in the form of two large freestanding folding screens. The images on the front and reverse side of the screen are exactly the same. So in this sense, there is no distinction between the front and reverse side of the screen. And they were placed in the center of the space, so there is no fixed viewpoint for the audience. The screens divided the space and at the same time physically transformed it into something different and new. Thank you.